In any life, we have highs and lows, light and dark, wins and losses. What happens when we encounter that moment in time when what happens next could change everything? Join us as we step into another person's inspirational moment and see how we can connect their experience to ours. This is Greg Stevens, and you're listening to A Shot of Inspiration. And welcome to another episode of A Shot of Inspiration. Today's guest is a really good friend of mine, someone who's been through the thick and thin of it with me. I've been a friend since 1992. I met him in Austin about 5 years after I moved here. We became fast friends, did a lot of things socially, eventually ended up being roommates. But I've always been impressed with my guest because he is one of the smartest people I know in the realm of engineering. And he has been a bridge engineer for years with the state of Texas, and he'll tell you a little about that. But his passion for bridges and developing and building bridges actually was contagious for me. When I would see a bridge, I really didn't never thought about it. And then when I met my friend Dean Van Landuyt, he worked for the Texas Department of Transportation in the Bridge Engineering Division. He did a lot of signature bridges in Texas. So you're going to get to hear and see a lot of those. I'm going to actually have some of those pictures up here. But I want to introduce you to my guest. This is Dean Van Landuyt. Dean, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Greg. How are you?
Good, good. Well, thanks for coming on. It's one of the things I love about having my podcast now. I get to showcase my really smart friends, people who are much smarter than me, but also just a really good human being. And I'm glad you came on. I know this is a little different for you, but I wanted to bring you on and talk about kind of your career because Dean retired a couple of years ago and he's done a lot of different things for the state of Texas. And I'd like to introduce yourself, tell people kind of where you came from, how you came up through your school, you went to UT, kind of walk us through how you became the bridge engineer here in Austin.
Well, thanks, Greg. I'd like to say I never really entered engineering. I never got out of it. You know, I started as a 2-year-old and just never quit while everybody else gave up their blocks and their forts and what have you. So I always had a natural inclination for it. I was always the first one in for projects and the last ones out. So but the light really went on for me when originally from Chicago, lived out in Massachusetts for a little while and moved to Dallas in high school. And I was sitting in a physics class and we watched a film on the building of the Alaskan pipeline from the North Slope across the mountains and then down into southern Alaska. And I was absolutely fascinated by the difficulties and the challenges. And it was the first time I'd ever heard of any such thing as a structural engineer. I've heard of architecture before, but I really didn't know what my major was going to be. And I'd always done pretty well in math and what have you. But I remember coming home that day and it was pretty much sealed. It was like, Mom, Dad, I'm going to be a structural engineer. So it just, everything had come together at that time. So I
How
came to
old,
UT.
how old were you at that time?
I was started my senior year, so I was about to turn 18.
Okay.
So
And did you
yeah,
know you were going to go to UT at that time, or had you already been looking at other places?
so we had moved to Texas the year before, and I'd been on a spring break the previous 6 months. I'd been on a spring break trip with my older brother, and we'd come to Austin, and we had rolled in about 11 o'clock on a spring morning, and the sun was shining, and the birds were singing, and class was getting out, and the West Mall was alive, and it took about 2 minutes to just fall in love with the campus. And I just kind of knew I was going to UT.
That's great.
And then to
Look,
come find out that they had one of the leading structural engineering schools in the world just worked out for the best.
that's great. And that's another thing. You're such a huge UT football fanatic. I love that. I think you never missed a game in college or something. Was that right?
yeah, and for years afterward, I did miss one game, and that was the tech game my senior year. I had to take an all-day principles and EIT examination, 8-hour examination for engineering training exam. So I missed that, and then I missed one game in the '80s for a wedding. But yeah, but those days of not missing games are long gone. But yeah, so yeah, I was able to graduate in 4 years, and then times were really tough trying to get a job. It was not unlike a couple of years ago when the hiring was really tough. And even though I had good grades, and it was really difficult, so I asked one of my professors. It was the last week of school, my senior year, and I only had one job offer. It wasn't very enticing, and it was for a Fort Worth manufacturing company, but I wanted to be a designer. And he had said, "Well, why don't you have you talked to Bob Reed at the Bridge Division?" I'm like, "What's the Bridge Division?" And he's like, "It's the Department of Transportation. Why don't you go talk to him?" So I made a phone call over there, and he said, "What are you doing at 4 o'clock?" And I was like, "Nothing." Got over there at 4 and had a job offer by 4:30, and asked if I could sleep on it. He looked at me like, "What's the matter with you, son? This is what you want to do." And called him up the next morning, and then 32 years later, walked out the door.
That's amazing. Well, now you did several signature bridges in Texas. Share with the audience what bridges they may have crossed over that were yours, kind of the big names. I know the last one you did before you retired was the 7th Street Bridge, was it PBS that did a documentary on that?
Right, that's the arch bridge where they wanted something a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, a signature structure going between the museum district and downtown Fort Worth. Also did the upper deck of 183 elevated about 25 years ago, a large bridge down on the coast in Matagorda, as well as US 281 over Marble Falls.
Oh, okay. You
So
did. I didn't
those are
realize you did the one in Marble Falls. Okay.
Yep. So
Okay.
those are pretty much the big signature structures that I've done, and those take a lot of time from planning and meeting with the locals to design, and then all the way through construction and solving construction problems.
Yeah. And we're going to actually include on the site a link you can go to, folks, to see the PBS documentary that Dean did on the bridge at Fort Worth. It was interesting because I just started dating my wife, my now wife, Emily, and we sat down and I thought, oh, there's a documentary on the bridge my friend developed, and that's the last thing she wanted to see. We just started dating,
Smart
but
woman.
she humored me, and after it was over, she said, "I really enjoyed that. I wasn't expecting to." And it really is. It's a engineering marvel. How long did it take you to do it? It typically would take a suspension bridge like that a couple of years, and y'all did it in how many months?
Well, we built the majority of it off-site, so it was restricted traffic for, gosh, like 4 months, and then closed down entirely for another 4 months or so. I may be off on that a little bit, but yeah, that was one of the real challenges: get in, get out. So we did a lot of the casting offsite. So we had a lot of constraints. Don't spend any money, make it look great, and then don't linger around here. So it was a real challenge, but a lot of fun, and those are the great projects.
Oh yeah. Well, it is a beautiful bridge, and I remember the first time you sent me something someone had been skateboarding over it right it got built. I thought that was really amazing that something was
Well,
going up and
fun,
down, and that went viral for a while there, I think.
funny you should say that. I've got a call from Los Angeles just a couple of weeks ago. They used this bridge in Fort Worth for inspiration of the new 6th Street viaduct in LA. And I've never seen the movie Grease, if you can believe that, even though it came out when I was in high school. But apparently that bridge is used in Grease and a lot of other iconic films shot in LA, but that has now been replaced, and they have the same type of concrete arches. And it has been also climbed on by vandals and what have you, and a number of other incidences, and it has just been a complete mess. In fact, they've already allocated $750,000 for remediation measures on a bridge that opened just last month, and now they're having a lot of trouble. It's been such an attractant for people to come and be all over the bridge. So it's one of the unfortunate things about building an attractive structure that has accessibility issues.
Well, I see behind you, there's a column. If you could kind of move to the side and point that out, that was a 183 column, wasn't
Oh
it?
yeah, right. Yeah, right there. Yeah. Yeah, that's a European magazine featured an article that I had written some years ago for the bridge here in Austin on the 183 elevated. And that was before we had put the superstructure on.
So you didn't really start out with this passion for bridges. It was just structural engineering.
Structures in general, yeah, yeah. It
got
just and it just fell in that right here in Austin, there was an opening to design bridges, and uh, it just worked out. And bridges are advantageous in the sense that there's no architect, and so unlike building projects where the structural engineer is not really in charge, in the bridge world, the structural engineer controls the project. And so it gives us a lot more responsibility, but then a lot more freedom as well. So, and then it's also a lot more difficult on the aesthetic side. We don't have the luxury of what a building designer does because we don't have veneers, right? We're just out there naked. So it's like a Mr. Universe contest. If you haven't been lifting weights for 5 years and watching your diet, you're in trouble because you're just walking out there in a bikini, man. You know, just you and your Speedo. So, you know, you better have it together. And that's the way it is in the structural world. If you haven't thought about everything and the way the bridge is going to behave after it rains over a number of years and stains the structure and the way it looks from every angle, you're going to be in trouble. So it's quite the challenge. But yeah, so I've enjoyed the bridges, and then it's just a lot more structurally difficult in general, not always, but when you start doing these large bridges down on the coast, Lake Marble Falls, what have you, these big spans that are longer than a football field, then it becomes a real challenge. And then you're dealing with hurricane forces down on the coast and what have you, and then you're supporting 18-wheelers rather than, you know, just people and bookshelves and what have you. So not that building engineers don't have their own challenges too, but well, the aesthetic issues are really quite difficult in bridge design if you want to do anything more than just your standard beam bridge.
Right. Well, I also admired when we first became roommates, you took, was it about 6 months, and you worked actually on site on the 183 bridge. Most engineers don't go out and do that, but I love that you went out there. You wanted to see what it really took. Do you think that helped you in preparing for the bridge in Fort Worth? That's what I've always wondered. Your experience being there, boots on the ground, being out in that hot Texas sun, booting up and really doing the gritty work with the guys right on the ground, where most engineers would never do that. Do you think that helped you see things to design the bridge in Fort Worth?
Most definitely, being out there and on the job, understanding the problems that the contractors have. That's a thing the public doesn't understand, and even design engineers don't understand is the challenges that the contractor goes through.
Give me a couple of things that no one would ever know that is so important about that. Give me an example.
I think that one of the most difficult things is the fact that most of our work is going on under traffic. So it never stops. So it's the equivalent of remodeling your house, beginning, or your kitchen, let's say, beginning in October and ending in February. Oh, by the way, you're going to host Thanksgiving dinner. The kids are coming home for Christmas, and you're throwing in a New Year's party. Okay. You know, the traffic doesn't stop. So there's a lot of those issues of dealing with traffic. And so you're constantly moving the traffic from one side of the project to another. And now you've got to deal with drainage issues. You've got to grade the roadways in one way, you know, for this condition, and then another way for that condition, and put some inlet structures in or what have you, and you've got to move the cranes from one side of the project over to the other side of the project. You buy a second crane or rent a second crane, which are expensive, or you just wait and then move it over some weeks later and slow the project down. So these are all the difficult things that the contractor has got to decide. In addition, I had worked on a concrete crew while I was in college, and then doing my graduate work at UT, I had worked in the lab, so I knew how to build forms and cast concrete. And then one of the great advantages of having worked at TxDOT is that we've got maintenance forces and we've got construction engineers that we office with. So we're getting feedback in the field the whole time. So that was the beauty of working as a designer at TxDOT, whereas if you just work in private industry, which I do now on a part-time basis. I do work for a consulting firm here in town, designing the Waller Creek pedestrian bridges.
Okay.
One of the advantages is we get the constant feedback loop. So that keeps us out of trouble. And then doing the maintenance, we also know what details don't work. Yeah. And so it's really a great benefit to the taxpayer of Texas to have a design department, a bridge division with a well-developed design section that has that constant feedback and constant communication, because then the designs get refined and we get more durable structures every year.
Well, that was what was interesting to me when you were working full time. I always asked you why you didn't go into the private side, because you probably make more money, and you were interested in the new technology. You said with University of Texas being right here, you had access to things that people didn't. Also, they let you play with some things aesthetically. Sometimes when private, they just want it to go up quick and looking bottom line dollar. It was something that you could actually look at helping the aesthetics. You actually did talks, I think, on aesthetic bridges for different cities and things. I remember you went to Europe a couple of times and spoke about that, didn't you?
Well, I got an opportunity early in my career to develop a more aesthetically pleasing bridge rail. People were getting a little bit tired of just this slab-looking bridge rails, and they wanted to know if we could do something a little better. And I had reinvigorated some of the old Art Deco style railings of the past and strengthened them and made them safer with today's more rigorous testing standards. And that was caught fire and used all over the country, and I really enjoyed doing it. One of the problems with our very sophisticated and advanced design techniques and structural systems that we have developed primarily in the 60s, 70s, 80s is that it had been so well optimized that there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for creativity. So once I got a chance to do a bridge rail, I really enjoyed exercising those muscles. And then I took it a step further into working with bridges on the whole. And so that gave me an opportunity in the bridge division in TxDOT to improve, if you will, the appearance of some of our bridges. And so there was that opportunity there, and there was a need for it too. People were getting a little bit tired of some of the stale, repetitive bridge designs. But then there's the challenge too, because it costs a little bit of money to improve things very much so.
Well, I also can see we waste a lot of money on a lot of other things that aren't pretty. And I think making an area that we have to drive every day a little more aesthetically pleasing is kind of nice, rather than seeing something, the same old thing over and over. So out of all your bridges, what was was Fort Worth your favorite one, or what do you say is your favorite one?
Yeah, Fort Worth, because it was so daring and it was one of a kind, and it was no one had ever attempted anything like that. And we came in at a good price. We got in, we got out, and there was a lot of public support, and the public really appreciated it too. So there was a lot of goodwill, and so it was really a great capstone to it.
Well, you also helped
career at TxDOT.
You helped a lot of businesses by doing it so quickly, having that, because that's such a key for businesses. That's one of the big benefits of that, rather, 4 to 5 months rather than a couple of years having that shut down. The economy for that area really thrived because of it. What I thought was interesting was Dean didn't just work on bridges, he actually kind of designed his own home. And his home was actually poured concrete. So I'd like you to talk about, you had a contractor on it, then you finally kind of took over the contracting yourself because you are a bit of a perfectionist, which I do love, and really pay attention to detail. But tell people about your house. I want to show some pictures here with your house and how you've developed it over the years, but also from the very beginning, how it was a poured concrete structure that you had this. I know they've done it out there, but most people would never take the risk on what you did. So share with people a little about your home. I really think it's a great inspiration to me as well. And folks, he even has a bridge in his home. So he walk up the stairs on one side and a curved stairwell, and then you walk across a bridge to where the bedrooms are. So it's a really amazing view house, and he bought it when land was cheap in Austin. And he has a beautiful view of downtown Austin, but he's built it up over the years. So Dean, share a little about your house. Talk with us about the structure of it, kind of the details of it, and then we'll show some pictures here if people want to look at those.
Well, thanks, Greg. You got most of the story right. I did hire an architect. Yeah, but
Okay, yeah.
I found a lot in 1996 while I was looking for a condo. But the laws in Austin were such that condos weren't being built in downtown, believe it or not. And so I resorted to buying a lot here down in Travis Heights, and then that's why I came to live with Greg. I needed to save some money, so he kindly rented out a room to me. But I hired an architect, and he worked in concrete houses, and it was a great relationship. He was very right-brained and very talented, except he didn't care much for details. So I had to redraw everything, and we actually worked real well together. One of the things that he kept doing is he kept messing up this beautiful layout with the stairs inside the house. So I asked him why he was putting the stairs inside the house, and he was like, "Oh yeah, let's put a stair tower out here." And so we got that. But then he was the contractor too. But then he didn't really enjoy contracting too much, so we just shook hands, and I finished building the house, and that turned out okay. And then I had a little bit more confidence, so I wound up designing and building a garage apartment that's actually 5 different levels. It's split level 3 on one side, 2 on another, and so I've got that. And then there was a big gully on the property, and so built a 15-foot tall retaining wall on that, and it filled the gully. And now I've got a pool and I don't know how many terraces on the property, 15. So it's just a continual project. And I finally got landscaping and a front yard in this spring. So it's only taken 25 years, but it's been a labor of love and a lot of fun. So I've enjoyed learning landscape design too. So it's been a transfer of skills.
Well, and that's just it on the landscape. You picked the hottest summer and the least rain. Finally, after 25 years, you got it perfect. And then when you plant it, there's no water and it's the hottest summer on record.
Timing couldn't have been worse, but we're getting there.
Yeah. But folks, if you get a chance, hopefully you've been seeing these pictures of a home. He just put the pool in about a year or 2 ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, 3 years ago now.
3 years ago. With COVID, everything's actually extended a little longer. But yeah, it's beautiful. I think you've got it really dialed in, but you can tell it has been a labor of love. You put even your countertops. Tell a little about your countertops. I think they're so unique and different.
Yeah, well, not that different much anymore, but yeah, they're cast in place countertops throughout the house. And I actually made my own formwork for some cast in place concrete balconies. I took some details for some bridges that I had designed and recreated them and made the balconies that way. And so took some opportunities to personalize the house.
That's awesome. Well, where do you get your ideas from? I mean, do they come just inspire you, or do you see certain people you look to inspire you around aesthetics, whether it's a bridge or your home? what are the things that kind of inspire you to have these ideas, or do they just come to you?
They just come to me. They're just from God. I don't know. They're just,
That's awesome.
but I work better with constraints. I I admire musicians. I admire painters who can just stare at a blank canvas. I work best when I've got restrictions,
Really?
and then I can get to work.
Okay. That's good to know. That's great to know. Well, is there anything you would like to tell the audience before we end this interview? I want to say, before I ask you that, Dean has been such a great friend. I'm sure I'm going to have him on here again to talk about other things we've done in life, some of the fun we've had. But he's truly been an inspiration to me because of the beauty that he's created for the roads around us, but also his passion for bridges. Like I said, I never had a desire to look at bridges. And now when I go to a city, that's what I look at. I look at the bridge structure. I look at the different architecture, the different engineering that had to go into them. So, Dean, is there anything inspiring to you that you would like to share with our audience before we finish up today?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say inspiring, but something that is, I don't know, an unusual observation about the profession is that there's a real morality in it. That's because we've got a couple of real harsh, unforgiving judges. We've got gravity, and we've got what we do in the business, which is low bid contracting. Okay. So you can't weasel your way around gravity. It gets the last word. Okay. If you haven't run the numbers, if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to win in the end. And then when you go to low bid contracting, you have to know that the least expensive bid is going to win and go build your job. And so it's nice in that regard for the taxpayer, is they're getting the least cost bridge out there. There's a lot of truth in the profession. So yeah, BS really walks in the profession, and the cream rises to the top. And so that's the nice thing, is the evidence out there of who's good in the business and who's not good. And that, there's no faking in the business.
That's very good. That's not what
So
we typically get in most of industries we look at today. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So it's a nice, clean profession for the most part. Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Well, Dean, thank you so much for being our guest this week. And folks, thank you for joining again, and look for us next time for another episode of A Shot of Inspiration. Thanks so much, Dean. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A Shot of Inspiration. If you like this or any of our other episodes, make sure you rate it and share it with a friend. This is Greg Stevens, and we look forward to being with you next time. Until then, be bold, be courageous, and respectfully speak your truth.